Need a healthy appetizer to bring to a family gathering? Hey, welcome back to At the Table, continuing with our summer series. So today we have two different dishes that are really good if you want to take a dish to maybe a family gathering or a cookout. During the summer is a lot of the time when we get together with our family, and even though we are amid a pandemic, still we want to see our family here and there, and even if it's a small gathering, you might want to bring a dish. So these are some really good healthy recipes for you to bring. They also use some of those fresh local produce that you might have either in your garden or that you can find locally in the stores. So what we're gonna make first is bruschetta, and this is one of my all-time favorites. Back when I used to work at Brick's Pizza through high school and then through college, this was my favorite thing that we had as an appetizer. So I've kind of recreated that somewhat to the best of my ability, and that is what we're gonna be making today. So we are gonna start with fresh tomatoes. Now you're gonna need about 4 medium tomatoes. I went ahead and cored 3 of these. I was gonna do 1 on camera for you guys, but usually you want a smaller knife than this, but since this is right here available to me, it won't hurt. And there is a little bit of bruising at the top here, so we wanna make sure we cut that out. Any of those bad spots in the tomato, you want to cut out. So I'm just gonna take that top part, and sometimes it happens so nicely. There we go. And there's a lot of juice there. I'm just gonna kind of remove that excess juice, and now it's ready to cut. I have went ahead and rinsed the tomatoes first, so make sure you do that. But I'm just gonna chop these up. So you just chop everything up really finely. And I have seen recipes also that might take out that center area that's kind of the goopy part. So if you don't like the seeds and if that bothers you, you can remove that. Totally up to you. I keep the seeds just because seeds in any of our produce do help to give us fiber, and it does help to aid in digestion. So you want to make sure that you are getting that in sometimes and where you can if it doesn't bother you. So we're just gonna chop all of this up really nicely. And you wanna make sure you're picking tomatoes that are kind of medium in size and very ripe. So if you have like an underripe tomato, this recipe isn't for you. It is best when your tomatoes are ready. Say you have an excess of tomatoes that you need to get rid of, and you know, you don't really have you have tons of tomatoes, you don't know what to do with all of them. This is a good recipe because it uses up a good amount, and you can double and triple this recipe too as needed as well. All right, so then you're just gonna throw all of that into your bowl. And we're gonna keep going with our tomatoes. So same thing here. And there's so much fresh produce available right now. Things like cucumbers, bell peppers, jalapenos, squash, watermelon. So definitely take advantage, especially in the areas that we are throughout rural counties. We have more access to fresh fruits and vegetables than some of those other areas because we have so many farmers that grow right here locally. And if you're looking for some fresh produce, you can actually check out the Visit NC Farms app. So it's an app that you can download right to your phone, and it's completely free. And you can look at Sampson County, or if you're in Bladen County, you can check that out. And you can see farms that are right there in your community that you can shop at. So it gives you the address, it gives you their phone number, so that you can go and shop locally with people right in your area. So definitely check that out. Y'all see these tomatoes look really beautiful. They have that really bright, pretty color. So we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be right back with our tomatoes complete.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. Security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
All right, so we got our tomatoes done. We're gonna add another type of tomato, which is sun-dried tomatoes. Now, if you've never had sun-dried tomatoes, I definitely recommend you grab a bag and try them out. They are right by the tomatoes in the little kiosk. I typically shop in Food Line, so that's where I have found them. They also come in oil, so you can buy them like in a jar in oil. I prefer the ones that are just dry in a package. Any kind will do. These, you just want to make sure that they're julienne cut, because they also sell them halved, and so you want to make sure that they are cut into smaller pieces. So this calls for 3 ounces. So actually we're just gonna dump the whole thing in there because this whole package is 3 ounces. So 1 bag of sun-dried tomatoes, and they're just dried tomatoes. They're a little sweeter because when you dry anything, it's gonna kind of condense and bring in some of that sweetness. So they're really, really tasty. Throw those in there. Next, we're actually gonna do our basil. So I've got fresh basil here, and this is in the same section right by the tomatoes. So really, a lot of what we're finding today, all these things go together. They pair it all near each other in the grocery store. So this is fresh basil. I've went ahead and rinsed it off and then dried it. A lot of times you want to dry your basil or any herbs that you're using after you rinse it, just because it helps to, when you're chopping it up, it helps it to chop more nicely. And then it also doesn't make anything that you're eating soggy. So we're just gonna chop this up. So little knife skills for you. You kind of bring all of your product in the middle, and then you're just gonna slowly move those fingers and keeping that tip of the knife on the board and doing what we call the rocking motion. And then we're gonna go the other way. You have to put a little force in it so that it will chop all the way through. Anytime you're using herbs, you want to make sure, even if it's not something that, maybe it's something you're going to pull out later, like, I'm trying to think. I mean, a bay leaf is already dried, so that's not a good example, but so let's say you were going to remove the basil later. You want to make sure that you do at least break it, because that will help to kind of emit some of the flavors that are in and the oils that are in the herbs. And so you want to make sure that you get that good flavoring from those oils. And that looks nice and finely chopped. So throw that on in there. All right, the next thing we have is my absolute favorite, which is fresh mozzarella. Now this is what makes such a difference when you're making bruschetta. Fresh mozzarella is the only way to go, in my personal opinion. I don't think that bruschetta tastes the same if you're using the shredded in the bag. You want to use a big ball of fresh mozzarella. Now, ideally, from a health perspective, we want to make sure that the mozzarella we're using is going to be reduced fat, meaning they used a low-fat milk to make that. It is hard for me to find reduced fat fresh mozzarella in our grocery stores. So, you know, we just gotta go full strength here, but we're not gonna be, this is, like I said, it's an appetizer. You're not gonna be eating this whole bowl. So it is gonna be spread out some in terms of how much you are actually eating. So we're just chopping these up into small pieces. If you've never purchased fresh mozzarella, it's in the deli section right by all of the deli cheeses. So you can buy a big ball of that. They do have like the mini pearls. Go for the big ball just because it's easier for you to chop up and add to it later. And this almost makes me think of a 4th of July dish just because we've got the pretty reds, we've got the pretty whites as well. You can serve it in a nice big blue bowl, and there you go. 4th of July ready. But very simple, just a few ingredients here, and it does have some chopping, but it's minimal chopping. So we add all of that up. And then the last thing we're gonna add is feta cheese, and we've got reduced fat feta. I choose the reduced fat because, again, talking about our health, we want to choose a low fat option. So I couldn't get that with my mozzarella, but I could get it with my feta, so I went for it. So we're not gonna use the whole thing, we're just gonna sprinkle this in. I'll probably use half of this. It's pretty good. And then we're gonna mix it all together and we'll see you right back.
Sweetie, will you turn that down, please?
Keep life exciting, even when it's not. Watch TV everywhere from Star Communications.
All right, so we've got our bruschetta nice and mixed together, and we did add 3 to 4 cloves of garlic in here as well. You want to use fresh garlic. It does not taste the same if you're trying to use garlic powder. You have to use either fresh. You could do the garlic that's in a can. That would be okay. Fresh is best in terms of garlic. It's my personal opinion. It has so much more flavor, and I feel like you absolutely need that when you're talking about bruschetta. So next, we are going to add in our olive oil and our balsamic and some seasoning. So we need a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And my thing's on the other side, but that's all right. A little bit more. And when you're picking olive oil, make sure it's in that dark bottle. You want to look for that expiration date. And then you also want to make sure that it's extra virgin. If you needed more information about that, we covered that in our Mediterranean series, so you can go back and watch those videos. So we did a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and next we're doing a 1/2 cup of balsamic vinegar. And you just want regular balsamic, but you could do a flavored one as well. I always go for regular. And I got a little more here. And then we're gonna add in our salt and pepper. And that's it. This is a very simple recipe. All things that you can find right here locally. So we're just adding about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Can definitely adjust that to taste. This is a 1/4 teaspoon, so I had to double that. And then we have a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. So we're just gonna sprinkle that in there and whisk it all together. This is kind of like our dressing or our marinade. And you just toss it in and stir everything up. Now, to me, this recipe is best if it's at least sat for an hour. I mean, I'll eat it right when it's done because I love it so much, but it tastes better if you give it a day or two. It just really soaks up all of that flavor and just blends together so nicely. Some other things you can do with this. So you typically, if you order this at a restaurant, it'll be served on a piece of like French bread that's been toasted, and they'll just put that on top. I like to put it on pizza. So that's a little trick that I learned when I worked at Bricks. They would have a bruschetta pizza occasionally with some blackened chicken, and it was so good. You've got the fresh mozzarella in here already. You could take a pita, whole wheat pita, and make little personal pita pizzas and add some of the bruschetta in there. And then also you could add some chicken. So you've got like a bruschetta chicken pizza, or you could do bruschetta chicken. So bake chicken and throw your bruschetta on top, let that mozzarella cheese melt, and it is so good. So you can make this whole batch and you can still do a lot of other things with it and have completely different flavor profiles. So this is something that is definitely a staple in our home. We absolutely love it, and it is so good. Anytime I've brought it to a gathering of any sort, people have always gobbled it up. So please try this, you will enjoy it. So we're gonna scoot on over to our yogurt dip next. And this is a recipe actually that my mother-in-law gave me. She had made it for my niece's birthday party, and we all loved it. It was so good. So this is very simple. It uses Greek yogurt. If you have not heard about Greek yogurt, it has tons of protein in it. I buy the non-fat. That's the way to go because we're watching that saturated fat content. But it also, you can use it in several other things. So it goes a long way. So we need a cup of this, and we're actually going to be using our little electric mixer here. The recipe just calls for you to whisk this up, but I'm going to just throw it in the mixing bowl because why not, right? Save me a little bit of time. So you need a cup of Greek yogurt. And then, move that there. Then we're gonna use some cream cheese. Now I cannot say this word. I'm not even gonna attempt it, but it is a third less fat cream cheese. So you just need half of this, and it needs to be at room temperature. This has been sitting out for a little bit. I choose this because it's lower in fat, and we wanna watch that saturated fat content. So I'm just gonna open that up. And we're just gonna be using half of this. So I'm gonna cut it in half, throw it to the side, save that for later. And then we're just gonna try our best. Now that it's room temperature, it tends to be a lot more creamy and sticky versus if it's cold. But we're just gonna throw all of that in to our mixer. So just cutting it in smaller pieces will help it to mix and blend a little bit better together. All right, so when we see you right back, we'll have that all mixed up.
After completing my contract, I still have to buy out of it? Come on. Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping home secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody try to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
All right, we've got our mixture here. We're gonna keep blending it up. And again, you don't have to use a mixer to do this. You could absolutely just use a whisk and a bowl. It'll work perfectly fine. You just want it to be all mixed together and kind of a cohesive consistency. So that is looking pretty good. And we're gonna be adding just a few other ingredients. So next we've got honey. Now remember, when we talk about added sugars, so if you didn't watch our Med Instead of Med series, we do cover that. Sugar is sugar, it doesn't matter what form it is in, so honey is still considered added sugar. and you need to count that towards your total sugar goal for the day. So we're gonna start with 1 tablespoon and then taste it and adjust it as needed. Now this is a fruit dip, so typically fruit's already sweet. This is just something fun to go along with it. So the fruit can give it that sweetness if you want it, if you don't want to add too much sugar, if you're trying to monitor that. Next we've got vanilla, and we just need half a teaspoon of that. So we'll throw that in there. And then we're gonna blend it all back up again. So we'll lower this back down. And we're thinking of things that are gonna be really light, something that when it's so hot outside, you might not want something that's really heavy. You might want something that's cooler. So this is a really good dish. And as well as the bruschetta, both of those are served, bruschetta is served room temperature. This is gonna be served chilled. That looks all blended. So I'm gonna taste it and see if we need more sugar. Personally, that's sweet enough to me. If you want to, you could add another tablespoon of honey. So, or start adding it in small increments. So you could do a 1/4 teaspoon, a teaspoon, start adding that in if you feel like you need a little bit more sugar to make it sweeter. But you know, it's all personal preference. Maybe you like it a little bit more tangy, which is gonna be with that Greek yogurt in there, that's a little bit tangier. So it'll help balance with that fresh fruit. So we're gonna remove this. Try not to make a mess. And we're gonna put it in our little bowl here. And it'll be ready to serve. Now I've got this paired with watermelon. It's just something that we had at the office. My director likes to buy some fresh fruit, and she always brings some to share to the office because she's just so sweet. So she got a big watermelon, we cut it up, and we've had that available for the week for us to just nibble on. So that is what we've got here. You could use berries, you could do really anything that you enjoy fruit-wise. Pineapple would be really good. Melons are in season as well. So anything that you know, any type of fruit that you really like would be really great paired with this. Now a tip for you when you're shopping for watermelon that I have learned from my horticulture agent, Brad here, he says that when you're shopping for watermelon, the tip is to look for where the watermelon has laid on the ground. That side will be yellow. So if it's got like a yellow spot on the bottom, that will tell you if it's a sweet watermelon. Sometimes there will be a white spot. That means it's not sweet. So look for a yellow spot on your watermelon, and that will signify that it's a sweet one. I always thought you had to knock on it. I don't know if you heard that tip, but you always knocked on your watermelon. I don't know what sound it's supposed to make. I could never figure it out. But he said, look for that yellow spot. That is the key to a sweet watermelon. So that is a good tip for you for when you're shopping for watermelon. Now in terms of storage, so we talked about our tomatoes. Anytime you are buying produce, you want to store it where you bought it. So for instance, apples, oranges, tomatoes, all of those are stored non-refrigerated, right? It's not in the refrigerated section. So when you're taking those things home, you want to store them non-refrigerated. Now there are other things that you want to keep refrigerated, like your berries, your greens, things like that. So just keep that in mind when you are, maybe if you have a garden at home and you're not sure, where do I put this stuff? Should I put it in the fridge or not? Store it on the counter if it's something like tomatoes, cantaloupe, things like that. For cantaloupes, if you're shopping for those, you want to make sure that it's the vine part is easy to pull out. That tells you if it's a sweet cantaloupe. And another tip, anytime that you are using produce that maybe you have a tomato plant and you've got green tomatoes on it and you really need some tomatoes right away, you can throw that into a brown paper bag, and there's actually a gas that is emitted, and that will actually help it to ripen faster, and your tomato will be ripe within a day or two. Same thing for bananas. If you're trying to get those to ripen faster, throw them in a brown paper bag, they'll emit that gas, and the gas will cause it to ripen more quickly. Things like berries, there are some things that continue to ripen after they're off the vine. So things like tomatoes, peaches, all of those continue to ripen. Things like berries, so your blueberries, your strawberries, once they're picked, they do not continue to ripen. So something like blueberries, if you have sour blueberries, unfortunately, they're not going to get sweeter over time. So you might just have to find another use for those. So I hope that you guys enjoyed our little series today and learned something of, you have a great dish that you can take to your next family gathering, and hopefully you can store that summer produce properly. And we will see you next time for our summer series.